Compensation contract documentation maintained by public institutions of higher learning from public disclosure under the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, so as to remove an exception to the exemption.
Senator from Aiken, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To be recognized to explain the bill.
You're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. This bill is the bill that you may have read about in the press recently that deals with name, image, and likeness in the college athletic setting in South Carolina. The bill would address new issues in our current NIL statute arising from a federal court settlement in a case called House versus NCAA, which authorized revenue sharing with student athletes. Now, just as a way of background, in 2021, I know there were several of us who served in the Senate in 2021. This General Assembly passed the original NIL bill in 2021, and it became law. And then in 2022, 2023, and 2024, the General Assembly suspended certain sections of that act by proviso in each of the appropriations bills in those respective years. And then we amended the NIL Act in 2024. Since our last action on this issue, the federal court settlement allowing institutions to revenue share with student athletes has occurred. And consistently throughout the history of this issue in our state, we have expressed our legislative intent to protect student privacy while balancing transparency issues. This bill would amend the current NIL statute to protect individual student privacy in the new realm of revenue sharing while requiring the public institutions to disclose the aggregate amounts spent on revenue sharing that's paid to its student athletes. So it reinforces and clarifies the General Assembly's intent rather than change any underlying policy that we have had implemented in our state for at least the past 5 years as it relates to name, image, and likeness. I also would like to share with you that in current code, we already protect disclosure of a specific student's NIL compensation amount. That's already in state law. And this bill will only extend that same protection to a specific student's revenue sharing amount. Again, the revenue sharing portion has come about because of the federal settlement that's occurred since 2024. When the General Assembly passed the last version of NIL, the revenue sharing was not in play. Again, the settlement had not occurred. That was not an issue when we addressed this the last time. It has only become an issue due to the federal settlement, which was issued after the passage of our amended act. Now, I do want to share with you that other states have enacted similar laws to what is before you. Those states include Louisiana, Kentucky, Utah, Arkansas, and Colorado. And there is pending legislation like this bill that is before legislatures in New Mexico and Wisconsin. Now, you have on your desk that was distributed today to each of you, there is a packet of letters. There's a letter from the athletic director from the University of South Carolina, Jeremiah Donati. There's a letter from the athletic director from Clemson University, Graham Neff. There's a letter from the athletic director from South Carolina State University, Coach Buddy Pugh. And then there's a letter from the athletic director of Coastal Carolina University, Chance Miller. All four of these athletic directors at these four major institutions in our state lay out in each respective letter why they are asking this General Assembly to pass this bill. And I point out to you that some of the reasons that they include in here, for example, is from the letter that Chance Miller wrote from Coastal Carolina. It says that the legislation strikes the right balance. It preserves public accountability by allowing disclosure of annual aggregate revenue sharing totals while protecting individualized student-athlete compensation terms. It also points out, and this is very important for every member to understand before we vote on this bill. It says that if this bill does not pass and these revenue sharing arrangements with student athletes are subject to public disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act, then there will be material, competitive, and immediate harm to schools like Coastal Carolina, like the University of South Carolina, like Clemson, and like Coastal Carolina, and like the South Carolina State University, all of whom have athletes in their athletic departments that are being compensated through revenue sharing arrangements. And we would be the only state in the country that would be allowing the disclosure of these types of agreements, and it would create a universe of competitive disadvantage for our institutions of higher learning, these athletic departments, compared to the competitors that they have in other states at other schools, both within the conferences that they are members of and outside of those conferences.
Senator from Sumter, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. To see if the senator yield for some questions when he, at the appropriate time.
I'll yield.
Senator yields for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Just a couple questions. I haven't, obviously, I am not as read into on this issue over the years as the more tenured senators are. One of the first questions that jumps out at me on this is, first I see I see the point. It all makes sense to me. I support it. My question would be, Senator, do we know how many public dollars are going into these programs and being distributed to these athletes? Do we have any indication of what those numbers are or percentages?
I don't have any of those numbers in front of me, but this bill would clarify that the universities would be required to disclose the annual aggregate revenue sharing totals, but they would not be required to disclose the specific contractual arrangements and revenue sharing totals that they have with student athletes.
Yes, sir. Well,
a specific student athlete.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. And I do agree that protecting their financial well-being, their personal information is extremely important. My concern is this. If obviously they're providing value, and I don't want to get into the greater issue because I think it's a much larger conversation that y'all have already had. But my concern is, just full disclosure here, my experience with school administrators really at every level has me deeply concerned. And this isn't to impugn anybody's character by any means, but there is clearly, in my assessment and my experience over the last few years, local and statewide, I've been very concerned about the forthrightedness with some of these administrators. So what I'm saying is what's the aggregate? 1 to 1 million? I mean, I don't know what this is. Is it $1 to $1 million? If that's true, that tells us nothing. So I would like to know where are these tax dollars are being spent? Are they being hidden from view? And again, not to imply or impugn anybody. My experience with school administrators at any level, it begs the question that we should have a much more lengthy debate before we make any decisions, because there is a personal interest for them to keep interest or information
Let me just clarify for you that under current law, under section 59-158-20 or section C, the current law as it exists today and has existed the last few years in South Carolina is that state funds cannot be used to pay an intercollegiate athlete compensation for use of their name, image, and likeness. That's the current law.
This amendment or
This does not change the current law.
Good. All right. Well, that answers my question, Senator. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President and members of the Senate, other key points, I mentioned what the current law is. I also would like to mention that there's no public sentiment that to deviate from the practice that exists across the Southeastern Conference, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Big Ten Conference, and the other schools that make up intercollegiate athletics, which is the policy overwhelmingly across the United States, is not to allow publication of these revenue-sharing contracts under state Freedom of Information Act laws. Some of you may know that there's a current lawsuit that was filed against the University of South Carolina related to this issue. My understanding is that that case is currently in a posture where it has been continued and it's on hold by order of the judge, whereby the reason is because the judge is aware that this General Assembly has pending legislation, and that case is on hold, waiting to see if the General Assembly takes any action that would affect that case.
Senator from Calhoun, what purpose do you ask, sir?
See if the senator would yield for a question.
Senator
yield.
For a question. Senator yields for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, I understand what you're talking about primarily as the point of the legislation to shield and protect the student athlete, I guess, from the information or from the amount that he or she is receiving in revenue sharing from being publicly disclosed. I get that. I'm assuming that's because if we had all of our student athletes that the amount that they were receiving could be publicly accessed, then other schools across the country could get that information and then decide that they were going to try to offer more to entice that student athlete to leave and go play for someone else.
It is already, as you know from reading in the press, it is already a very intense, competitive atmosphere. Coach Sweeney shared with the public the situation involving a recent athlete that they recruited and was already enrolled in classes last month at Clemson. And allegedly, that student athlete was contacted by the head coach from Ole Miss, and in a matter of days was at Ole Miss. So it is an extremely competitive environment that exists without these revenue sharing contracts being subject to public disclosure.
And I get that. I'm just trying to understand really how this is going to help in that situation, along with a feeling of somewhat frustration that I feel like.
If I could answer.
Sure.
So first of all, your sense of frustration. I want to recognize, I will be the first to tell you, I am not aware of hardly anyone. There are very few amongst us or amongst our constituents who are pleased with the state of college athletics and where it has evolved over the last 5 years. But what we're dealing with here is the reality of the state of college athletics. And what this bill would do is protect the disclosure of these arrangements. If we don't pass this, we will be the only state in the country that has not taken an affirmative step, when presented with an opportunity, has not taken an affirmative step to protect these types of arrangements. And it's clear from these 4 letters from the 4 athletic directors at South Carolina, Clemson, South Carolina State, and Coastal Carolina that if that happens, every school in this state that is involved in this, in these sports with these athletes who are good enough to be eligible for these types of compensation arrangements, it will place every one of the schools in our state at a competitive disadvantage.
And I understand what they're saying. You know, again, I guess, number one, I'll go back to the question. I thought I heard you say that X amount of number of states had already enacted legislation, and there was other states that had pending legislation.
Yeah, there's five, there's at least, I mean, and this is just some research that I did. There's at least 5 states that have passed very similar protection of these types of arrangements: Louisiana, Kentucky, Utah, Arkansas, and Colorado. There's pending bills in New Mexico and Wisconsin.
Sure, but what
And there
I'm
may
saying
be
is,
others out there.
right, but then how would we be the only one if we don't pass this? If there's still
We would be the only one that has been presented with legislation that would protect these from public disclosure who did not protect them. And if we don't pass this, then I think before the end of the year, and possibly before the next football season in our state, these arrangements may be public. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I know that you and I both served in the House. And when I served in the House, I remember an older member of the House told me there were 4 areas that you try to tread lightly with legislation, because you can really have a number of constituents become upset with you in a hurry. I see the senator from Anderson, Senator Gambrell, smiling back there. But that member told me that those areas were the 4 F's. They were fins, fur, feathers, and football. And I'm telling you that if we don't pass this, we're going to upset the apple cart as it comes to football, and every one of us is going to hear from our constituents, and we won't get back here in time next session to act quickly on this issue.
I take your warning. Warning is noted. I understand clearly what you're saying, Senator, but I do think it is important that we all understand exactly what we're, and I just wanted to make sure when I hear you say we'd be the only state that doesn't have it, and then there's other states that are.
Other states that, when we did our research, that there are other states that haven't passed this type of protection, but they haven't been presented with a scenario where they would need to. Just in full candor, I was told in doing some research that I did ahead of today that Alabama doesn't have a law that protects it, but the universities there just flat out, they're not going to disclose this.
And I get it. I guess I was to continue on with what I was going to ask if you knew. My level of frustration, though, is born and exists because I feel like we're just being drug along. And in other words, whatever some other state ends up doing, then the rationale for us being forced to adopt it is because, well, these other states are doing it, and so therefore we have to do it, or we're going to be putting, you know, our schools and our athletic programs at a competitive disadvantage. I get it. I don't have to like it, but it's still a reality. So I'm not arguing, and I'm not trying to sway anyone's mind to vote against this. I just wanted to note that. I mean, at the end of the day, I can see arguments for why it should and for why it shouldn't necessarily be disclosed, but I get where we are on that. I wanted to turn the page to what you spoke about a little bit earlier that we haven't really discussed, which was an additional requirement for the school to publicly disclose in aggregate the amount of revenue sharing that they take in. And I think that led to the senator from Sumter's line of questioning, and I'm glad to know that we've already got it in current law that public taxpayer dollars cannot be spent on revenue sharing. But why shouldn't we require some level of breakdown? Why shouldn't we know whether a school is deciding to spend 90% of its revenue sharing on one particular program or another, or one particular sport or another? Why should the schools be able to not disclose the fact that, you know, we're going to put all of our eggs in the basket of a football program, and therefore our other student athletes are not going to be able to take advantage of a system that is put up, perhaps with some level of, you know, specificity other than just the aggregate? Then, you know, maybe then fair criticism could be levied, or I admit, unfair criticism could be levied. But at the end of the day, what you're saying is all we're going to be getting is one total, and
Yeah,
we
if you
get
look at
nothing else.
if you look at the bill in 59-158 50C1, it says the total amount of revenue funds expended by an institution of higher learning during each fiscal year as part of an intercollegiate athletics revenue sharing program is subject to public disclosure. But then it goes further in the two subsections, and one of those addresses what you just said, is that they don't have to disclose how much they're allocate or how much is going to a specific sport. And the way it was explained to me and other members in the process, in the full education committee and the stuff and the research that I've done, is that if you require disclosure as to specific sports, then the other schools will be able to extrapolate what's being spent within that program, and they can figure out what it will give them another arrow in their quiver that they can use in trying to compete against our schools in our state for these athletes, and it would put our schools at a competitive disadvantage. And again, what I understand is that this bill is similar to what these other states have passed and again, those are Louisiana, Kentucky, Utah, Arkansas, and Colorado, and there's 2 other states.
And Senator, I get it, but because all of these states have been passing legislation like this continuously and falling over each other to pass the same legislation, that's why college sports is in a mess. And so the argument
college sports is in a mess, Senator, because there's been no action, consistent action at the federal government or by the NCAA to address a number of these issues. The fact that Coach Sweeney has complained about the contact that was made to one of his student athletes after the student started class and nothing has happened, and Coach Beamer has commented on it 2 weeks ago and said that the NCAA needs to step in and provide some guidance, and here we are, February 17th, and nothing's happened. That's why
So
the
how
state
does
of college
this help that? So how does this help that?
This will allow our schools to remain competitive. I'm telling you, if we don't pass this, we won't get back here quick enough next session. When your constituents and mine are calling us because our schools, when it becomes the December signing day in college football, and we're not able to compete because we have allowed the disclosure of this information, I'm telling you, you will be getting calls, and I will be getting calls.
That'll be fine, Senator.
And I'm the first to tell you that I support transparency.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second.
Yeah. Mr. President, with me holding the floor, I would ask permission, unanimous consent for the senator from Horry to introduce the doctor of the day.
Was actually the senator from Georgetown. Is there objection to the senator from Georgetown introducing the doctor of the day with the senator from Aiken retaining the floor on the bill in questioning here? No objection, so ordered. Senator from Georgetown and others are recognized for the purposes of introduction of the doctor of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it very much. It is my honor and privilege to introduce my friend, our friend, who's been here how many years? A long time. 40 years. Dr. Jerry Harmon. Dr. Harmon is a retired U.S. Air Force Major General. He's the former president of the SCMA and the AMA. He is currently the dean of the USC School of Medicine here in Columbia. He's joined here today by his medical student, Alan Kadab. I hope I did that justice. He's a Clemson grad. He's wanting to go into radiation oncology. Dr. Harmon has been a friend to many of ours, as you can see from all the people joining us around here today. But I'm proud to call him my friend and my doctor. He's been my personal doctor for many years when he was in Pawleys Island. So thank you for your service, doctor. I think that we got some others that may want to say something as well.
Senator from Newberry is recognized on the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Dr. Harmon and I have a few things in common. we both retired from the Guard, and in the Guard, his moniker was Gamecock Doc. Whenever he'd come in to fly in his 172, 182, whatever he had, at McIntyre out there, they would always call him Gamecock Doc. And several months ago, he sent me a text message, and he had discovered the other thing that we have in common and that he's most famous for is his family is also from Newberry. The Harmons were all born and raised up there in Newberry. And he told me that they originally were called the Hermanns, Hermann, from Germany, Baden-Württemberg area of Germany. And that's where the Kromers came from. And the Kromers and the Hermanns came over together on the boat that was a British boat from the Netherlands. And we were all on the same boat, and we landed at Charlestown Landing, Senator, from Charleston in 1752, and migrated up there around Newberry. So I did want to throw that out and say, Doc, I'm not sure if we were trying to escape religious persecution or if we were just looking for, our ancestors were looking for a better life, or if we were trying to escape the law. I don't know which one of those, sir. But at least we all came over on the same boat together, and we do have that in common. It's so good to have you here taking care of us in the legislature today.
Welcome. Thank you, Doctor, for your service, not only today, but throughout the years. We appreciate you and your colleague there. Welcome to the Senate. Thank you for serving as Doctor of the Day. The Senator from Aiken retains the floor with questions from the Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Calhoun.
So, Mr. President, members of the Senate, before we stopped for the introduction of the Doctor of the Day, there was a questioning between the Senator from Calhoun and me, and one of the things that I think he was saying is that if we pass this bill, it's not going to fix the state of college athletics. And I totally agree with him. And I think that everybody who served on the full committee that Senator Hembry chaired would agree that this will not fix the state of college athletics if we pass this bill. But I see it as and I think the majority of the committee saw it as something that, whether we like it or not, is something that we feel like we need to do in order to help our schools remain competitive in the environment in which they are competing in 2026 in college athletics.
And Senator, I appreciate that. We did have that conversation, and that's just, that's just what I wanted to highlight and point out. I do think sometimes the people I talk with at least there's a level of frustration, I think, when they hear us talk about the need or the necessity to pass certain bills, and we couch them in terms of, well, we have to do it, and it's all positive. And then reality later on down the road, it's not, and nothing has really changed. And I think that's where a sense of frustration is born from, because, I mean, am I wrong to think, again, pointing out that I don't think this solves a thing? In fact, it could possibly exacerbate the problem and make it even worse, because when you say we're going to shield from complete disclosure a student athlete, nothing stops a school from contacting said student. Nothing stops the said student from saying, yeah, I'm getting X amount of dollars in revenue sharing from my university, but hey, do you want to go higher? You want to match them, or do you want to beat them? What? And so now there is nothing. What we're doing now is we're setting up that system by which student athletes that want to shop themselves and want to get and maximize the amount of revenue sharing for themselves, and there is no real loyalty or allegiance to a school, they just want to get as much money as they possibly can get, then now they're going to be able to leverage this system because they know there's going to be no public disclosure. A school's not going to be able to find out truly how much they're making in revenue sharing. They're going to be able to portray themselves as making X to try to go and get Y. And so all I care about, I'm going to vote for it, because I agree that I'm not going to put Clemson, Carolina, and all of our other universities from their perception in a disadvantage. But I just think it's important that we're honest with people who may be listening and honest that I don't think it's going to change anything. I don't think it's necessarily going to help the state of affairs that college athletics is in. And so I'm just taking the opportunity to, again, highlight and implore that the NCAA needs to get control of this. If the feds need to do something, they need to do something, or it's going to continue to evolve, and we're not going to have amateur sports anymore. It's just going to be a sub-level of the pro system.
If you're going to require disclosure in South Carolina, it should be required across the country, and everybody should be on a level playing field. And that has to happen through either the NCAA and or federal government. So,
Senator from Berkeley, Senator Fernandez, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Wonder if the speaker would yield for a few questions.
Senator,
Yes.
yield for questions. Senator, yields for questions.
This is just for my own clarification, Senator, so I know. The money that we're talking about in this bill is not taxpayer dollars, correct?
correct. You cannot pay, under current law, they cannot use state funds to pay a student athlete.
And so a lot of this money is possibly coming from donors, media deals, ticket sales, boosters, things like that, correct?
It's their revenue sharing, yes.
Okay. And so the biggest question...
It's money that they've generated through their revenue generating capacities.
Okay, and so this bill ultimately isn't asking to keep taxpayer dollars confidential, correct?
There's an argument that every dollar that goes into the university ultimately becomes taxpayer dollars, but it's not money that this General Assembly has appropriated to the university, as I understand it.
Right, and so this is money that the school went out individually to get from private donors to actually help be competitive with some of their own athletes that they're bringing in, right?
Yeah, and as I was saying earlier to the senator from Sumter, there's existing state law that says that no appropriated funds appropriated by the General Assembly that are appropriated to that university or college can be used to pay an intercollegiate athlete compensation for NIL, which is name, image, and likeness.
Okay, and so basically what we're trying to do is protect essentially like non-disclosure agreements with athletes to help them come into South Carolina or something similar. Am I wrong in saying that?
This would say that the bill says that these arrangements with these dollars are not subject to Freedom of Information Act disclosure.
And the lawsuit that's been filed is trying to make this all public. Is that right?
As I understand it, there was a Freedom of Information Act request submitted to both South Carolina and Clemson and potentially other schools. South Carolina responded first and didn't disclose the information, and the lawsuit was filed. That's my understanding.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Chester, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Senator will yield for a few questions.
Senator, yield for questions.
Thank you, sir.
Senator yields.
This is the one question that I have. Because this is all about the revenue sharing money that's coming in, correct?
Yes.
All right, so if that revenue sharing, if the revenue is spent in any other way than to share that with the students, is it otherwise discoverable under the Freedom of Information Act? If they use that money to say, add on to a stadium, if they use that money to do anything other than share it with the student athletes, is it discoverable?
It says, the bill says that the total amount of revenue funds expended by an institution of higher learning as part of an intercollegiate athletics revenue sharing program is subject, is subject to public disclosure, the total amount. So the money that they spend, the total amount for the revenue sharing is subject to public disclosure.
Well, and so
if they're spending money generated from these other sources on things other than revenue sharing, then I don't see anything in here, at least nothing that jumps out, that would make it not subject to disclosure.
Okay, so hypothetical, just for easy numbers, say we got $50 million that comes in through revenue sharing that the University of South Carolina gets from the SEC in their immediate contracts and yada, yada, yada. Of the 50,000 or 50 million, if they spend 25 on renovations to Williams-Brice Stadium, all of that information would still be available under the Freedom of Information Act.
I don't see anything in this bill that would exempt that from being subject to disclosure.
So it's just the amount that's shared with the student athletes.
I mean, I don't see anything in the bill that would apply to that, but I don't have the full act in front of me. I don't know if there's something already in the law that would address that, but I don't see anything in this bill that would exempt that, under that hypothetical, that would exempt that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Senator from Williamsburg, what purpose do you rise?
Thanks, Mr. President. Who was Senator DeGio for one question?
Yes, sir.
Senator Yields for question.
Senator, do you know that as I sat there on the subcommittee, the one thing that disturbed me was when we found out that there was a state that prohibited disclosure, but had sent us a FOIA request. Were you familiar with that?
No, sir. No.
Yeah. So it's my understanding, Senator, did you know that that some states prohibit the disclosure of these private contracts? You aware of that?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's Louisiana, Kentucky, Utah, Arkansas, and Colorado, I believe, have all passed similar legislation.
Yes, sir. And would it surprise you to know that one of those states actually FOIA'd our information?
That doesn't surprise me. This is a highly competitive environment in 2026.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Corbin, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Senator Yield for a question or two.
Senator Yield for questions.
Senator,
Senator Yields for questions.
Senator, did you know that, as far as I can tell, and I just looked it up on my computer here, that the salaries of every Clemson employee is posted online?
I think they are if they're over a certain amount.
Well, I'm looking at them here down below 50,000, and I'm sure they go up all the way up to the president. I mean, of course, we can get that because I'm on the finance committee that allocates those funds.
And I think what's disclosed, unless I'm remembering incorrectly, I think what's disclosed is what's paid for with the public funds, the state dollars.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I mean, because that, but they're also, these people that are listed here, they go to Clemson and have an opportunity to make this money, this salary, support their families, but they're using state-funded money that built the classrooms and put the infrastructure in and the tools they need to use that to earn this money. So that's pretty well full transparency, which I believe is what we all like. But yet, the football stadium, athletic fields and all like that are also sitting on public property. Now, I understand that the money to pay these athletes is not direct tax money, but their ability to earn this money is through the utilization of tools supplied by the state. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, Senator, I don't disagree with most of what you said, and I think I know where you're headed with some of these questions, and I'm telling you that everybody in here agrees with you that that having to address this issue, you don't have a good feeling about it, okay? But at the end of the day, you have to weigh you have to just kind of weigh the equities, and in this scenario, all four of the athletic directors at the four major institutions that compete at this level in our state have said if we don't pass this, it's going to put every one of their schools
Senator,
at a competitive disadvantage. And I'm telling you, if we don't pass it, We're not going to be able
The
to get
world's
back
gonna
here
end.
quick enough.
I get it, Senator.
Next session.
I get
Pass
it.
it.
The world's going to end if we don't pass this, is the feeling, the vibe I'm getting from you. And all I'm just trying to make the point is money's fungible, right? And that taxpayers do foot the bill for the tools necessary for these people to earn their living, and it's all online, but yet we're asked to change the rules for the athletes. And I understand the repercussions.
Well, no, I would disagree with you to some extent on that. And the reason is because we've already passed in law that what the athletes are paid in their NIL contracts is not subject to disclosure. The source of the funds is different, as I understand it, under this settlement.
Right.
And because it's a gray area, we've been asked to take this legislation up. And again, somebody other than us needs to act nationally and make it a level playing field so everybody has to disclose.
Senator, can you tell me a scenario where that's going to happen, or even a vague scenario of how it could happen? Well, every linebacker gets so much money, every quarterback, that's not going to happen.
No, what I was saying is that it's the senator from Calhoun was asking earlier, and we were talking about it. If our state allows the disclosure of these contracts, and we're the only one in the country, it's going to create a problem for our schools and the athletes and the supporters and everybody involved.
We're not the only one in the country, are we? There's only 5 that have passed this.
At least 5 that have passed similar laws, but we're not aware of any that have rejected passing one.
Right, but to your point, there are only 5 that have been passed. And Senator, I like you. I just don't like being under duress to do something. I don't like being told, if we don't do this, the world's going to come to an end. Because I love Clemson. I went to Clemson. My wife went to Clemson. I love Clemson football. But I just have a hard time believing that the world's going to end, or it's going to even be portrayed the way if we don't pass this bill. And I don't like being pushed into a corner for any piece of legislation.
All I can point you to is Graham Neff is the athletic director at Clemson University. He has written a letter that's in the packet, and he is urging us to pass this bill.
I will take that into all due consideration when I cast my vote. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you ask?
See if the senator from Aiken would yield for a question.
Senator Yields for
yield.
question. Senator Yields.
Senator, I remember when this NIL stuff came through. I don't personally like the NIL. I voted against the legislation, but we were told then we had to hurry up and pass it because something was going to happen or we were going to be behind. Why was what we're having to rush to do now, why wasn't that accounted for in the original rush?
It's because when I first came up here today, I explained that the reason this wasn't part of the original bill in 2021 and the reason it didn't come up in 2022, 2023, or 2024 is because what has happened is that there was a national settlement in a case called House versus NCAA, which authorized revenue sharing with student athletes. And that settlement occurred after we passed legislation in 2024. And it's because of that settlement, that federal court settlement, that has now allowed the institutions to revenue share with student athletes. And sometime last year, there was a Freedom of Information Act request sent to USC and Clemson and whoever else in the state. As I understand it, USC replied first. They did not disclose specifics. And then under the Act, the Freedom of Information Act, as this General Assembly has passed it, it allows that person seeking that information to go to circuit court to challenge the non-disclosure. And so that case is pending. And the judge has put that case on hold while this bill is considered by this General Assembly in the 2026 session.
Okay, and if we wait, we could find out what the court says, right?
If we don't do anything, then the case, then the court will revive the case. The temporary hold will end, and they'll go back, and there'll be arguments made that it's not subject to disclosure, this bill would make it clear that it's not subject to disclosure.
All right, well,
Now,
I
there's
understand that. Let's figure out that let's assume we don't pass this bill and the court rules in the way that maybe somebody doesn't want. What happens then? Somebody's got to tell about this. I
And
mean,
this
they thought it was
information
so
would be
good for our
that-
athletes to get paid to play. Why wouldn't we want people to know what they're getting paid? I mean, it shouldn't be a secret, I don't think. I mean, is there a reason it should be a secret?
Again,
I'm not giving you a hard time. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Again, I go back to, it's not a, if that information is subject to disclosure in South Carolina, then Clemson, South Carolina, SC State, Coastal Carolina, all will be on a different playing field, excuse the pun, from other schools that they compete against. And it will be more difficult for them to recruit student athletes in today's environment, which will directly impact the success of their programs. And when their programs have a lack of success because of this issue that we could address, that's what I was saying, is that we're going to start hearing from constituents who are going to ask us to address this issue. And I agree with you. There needs to be, and the senator from Calhoun and senator from Greenville, in expressing general discontent with having to deal with this issue. But the reality is that in today's environment, there either needs to be a national solution that requires everybody to act under the same rules, or we need to do what we can to make sure that our schools can remain competitive in today's environment. And I submit to you that passing this bill would do that.
So I heard somebody say, I don't know if it was you or another senator, said there's only 5 states that have passed this. So our in-state schools could be playing against people that are in the same boat with them, right? If only 5 states, do we play more people than out of 5 states?
There may be other states. Those are the ones that I have found that have passed similar ones. Again, there's not been any state that I found that has been presented with an opportunity to pass a bill like this that has not passed it.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to, I'm really trying to understand if it, okay, so it's up for disclosure, it gets disclosed. Why is that the end of the world? Well, I mean, help me understand, why does that keep somebody from playing?
Well, I mean, and there's in these letters that are on your desk, you got a copy. Every one of these athletic directors has said that if they have to disclose, for example, Coach or Graham Neff, athletic at Clemson, says, subjecting these agreements to public disclosure would raise serious privacy concerns for our student athletes, potentially exposing them to undue public scrutiny and creating risks that extend well beyond the playing field.
So does that mean when they all think that the quarterback's making $3 million, but they're not really sure and they ding him on getting that or whatever, but they find out later he's really making $5 million and he doesn't do good, then they're going to attack him on social media? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
It may be. I mean, you know, again, this is not a realm in which I work every day. It's not a realm in which you work every day. It's not a realm in which the senator from York works every day. These guys that have written us these letters, this is what they're paid to do, is to run these athletic departments in 2026 in today's environment. And it's an extremely difficult job. But they have written to us these letters and have explained why they are encouraging us and asking us to pass this bill for the reasons that are in their letter.
But if we didn't have NIL, we wouldn't have to worry about this, right?
Again, yes, if we could go back and say, all right, let's go back to 2018 or 2019, whenever it was, that we didn't have NIL. Clemson was a national champion in 2018, which I think may have been the last year before we had NIL, I think. But the environment has completely changed. Clemson was a national championship in college football in 2018. In 2026, Indiana won the national championship, and what I saw was they hadn't even been to a bowl game or hadn't won a bowl game since 1991 or something like that. It was a long time. So the environment has changed, yes.
They told us when we were dealing with this NIL that eventually certain alumni associations would make sure that they won. And we were told that we would never have to deal with this anymore. That's what frustrates me is we're paying all these students to do this, and it's just gotten out of control. I mean, and I'm frustrated with it.
I
Did you
think,
know?
Senator, I think every senator in here, especially the ones who served in this body in 2021, are frustrated with this, having to deal with this issue. I know the senator from Ori, the chairman of the Education Committee, has expressed that publicly when we've had to deal with it, both in the full committee and on the floor. But it's the environment that we're in, and appreciate your questions.
Senator from York, Senator Johnson, what purpose do you ask, sir?
Will the senator yield for a question?
Yes.
Senator yield for question. Senator yields.
Senator, did I hear you correctly earlier say that universities in the state of Alabama have just chosen not to comply with FOIA requests at all?
That's what I have heard. Now, again, that is anecdotal. I have not seen it in writing. That's just what I've heard.
And based on listening to you today, the reason, as I get it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator, the reason they're doing this, isn't it, is because their concern is that athletes, once other schools, once other members of the SEC or ACC know what everybody's making, they're going to descend upon those schools and attempt to pay those players more or lure them away in some way, shape, or form.
That's correct.
And that's just not football. That's basketball, baseball, various sports in which athletes are making some form of money through NIL.
That's correct.
And Senator, did you know that while I attended the University of South Carolina for law school, I went to school out of state. I went to Auburn University for undergrad.
I'm fully aware of that, Senator.
And Senator, I can tell you, as an Auburn graduate, I'm thrilled to get your information and pick through it and steal your best athletes. But as someone who understands what's good for the game, Senator, did you know that I intend to support this bill and believe we need to get this passed so that the universities in this state can continue forward, and hopefully at some point the federal government will fix NIL, but until then, we have an obligation to make sure that our universities are just as competitive as places outside of this state.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Corbin, what purpose do you rise, sir?
I'm going to yield for a couple more questions.
Yes.
Yield. Senator continues to yield for questions.
Senator, so this income that the athletes earn, it's for, you know, making commercials for Subway or whatever, you know, selling their name, image, or likeness. Are those athletes also allowed to just take charitable contributions? In other words, if I like the quarterback, I could just give him $10,000 and say, hey, I like what you're doing, here's $10,000. Keep up the good work. Is that allowable?
Senator, if that would be a gift, and I don't know of any reason why you couldn't give a gift to a student athlete.
I think prior to this you could.
In today's environment, it probably has to be. Again, I don't know. I know that before NIL, if you gave a student athlete a gift, it would violate NCAA rules.
Exactly.
Now, today's environment, I'm not sure. I don't practice law in that area. I don't know how it works. So I don't know if your hypothetical would be allowed or not.
Let me ask you this. Is the money those athletes earn, is it taxable? Federal and state taxable?
So the money is, what they earn is taxable. And if you remember, I think it was in 2024 when we made some changes to the NIL law in our state. One of the changes that we made was to allow the athletic departments of the different schools in our state to be able to provide more assistance to the student athlete on their NIL compensation, which included making available to them tax advice. Because we heard, I was on the subcommittee, Senator, if I could be heard. I remember Senator Talley, I think, chaired the subcommittee. Senator Hembry created the subcommittee. I served on the subcommittee. And we heard testimony that there were student athletes in our state that had made a lot of money in NIL who didn't know they had to pay taxes on that money. and they were and they'd spent most of the money, and they were in a pickle because, as you know and I know.
How'd they get out of that pickle?
Well,
Senator?
I don't know the specifics on that, but the law at the time would not allow the schools to make available to them tax advice. And so we had to pass what we passed in 2024. One of the parts of what we passed was to legally allow the schools to be able to give tax advice or make tax advice available to the student athletes.
Okay, so we've determined that it's taxable. Who sends them the 1099 or the W-2?
Senator, I don't know this. I assume it's the entity that's making the payment, but I don't know how all that works. I mean, we can certainly try to find out for you, but I don't know. I don't have any of that with me up here today.
I was just curious because, you know, if this is centralized in any way, and it's such valuable information, I can assure you there's going to be leaks in organizations, and some of these numbers we're trying to protect are going to get out anyway. And
so let me remind you that the current law that we passed in 2021 protects from disclosure the NIL amount that is being paid to a specific student. Again, this is the revenue sharing portion of compensation under NIL is what this addresses. And there's an argument that the current law would prohibit the disclosure, but there's an argument that it does not. This bill would make it clear that that disclosure of the revenue sharing arrangement would not be disclosed under the Freedom of Information Act.
so there would be no transparency in that regard, correct?
You are no transparency as the specific arrangement, but the aggregate amount would be disclosed. Again, we each have not pleased with where we are, but this is the state of college athletics, and if you weigh the equities with what we're faced with until there's a level playing field and something's done across the country, this is what we probably need to do in order to make sure that our schools remain competitive in today's environment in 2026.
Senator from Charleston, Senator Eber, what purpose do you have?
Senator, yield for a question.
Senator yield for question. Senator yields for question.
Senator, I want you to know, I'm going to be, did you know, I'm going to be supporting this bill. And I just want to say, I don't want to open up the whole argument again about NIL and all that. But I just want to point out possibly that the unnatural dynamic is to tell an 18-year-old they can't earn money. To be the government and tell an 18-year-old you can't earn money based on your skill or who you are or what you can accomplish in the open market. It's unnatural to do that. It's not unnatural to be trying, as this bill does, to enable these 18-year-olds to earn money in the system. Would you agree with that?
I agree with you for purposes of your line of questioning.
I mean, it's more of a stretch, right? It's more of a stretch for government to step in and go, you can't earn money.
Yeah.
You're 18, but because you play a particular sport or you do this with your skill set, we don't want you to earn money. I mean, that's the unnatural dynamic or environment to be trying to suggest that or insist on that. And what this bill actually does is try to facilitate these folks to earn money in the state of South Carolina and be able to compete with other states on the football field or wherever it is.
To enable the student athletes to be able to do that, but also to give the school the tools it needs to be competitive with the other schools. Like the senator from York said, he went to Auburn University. There are people at Auburn that would love to have this information to be able to, or Alabama, or Mississippi, or LSU, or North Carolina, or Virginia, well, you name it. If it's a competitor of one of our in-state schools, they'd love to have this information. The senator from Williamsburg brought to our attention that I think he said that it was a school in one of these other states, or not a school, but some person or entity in another state that had passed a similar protection that had sent an FOI here trying to get the information.
Yeah, so my point only is that we've gotten into sort of maybe a quandary here or a problem, because government got involved in the first place and started setting rules on who can make money and who can't, and how they can make money and how they can't. So now we have that dynamic throughout the many states, and everyone's trying to facilitate or prohibit. And then you have this new competition that if you want to have a successful football career, year or even a program, you've got to make sure that your students can compete in the rest of the nation against these other schools in a dynamic that we created. Government created this, or the sporting organizations, the NCAA. So the more we can get out of the way and facilitate this, I think it's best.
Senator from Richland, Senator Walker, what purpose do you ask?
If the senator from Aiken would yield for a couple of questions.
Senator yield for questions. Senator yields for questions.
Senator, did you know that I intend to vote in favor of this bill?
Thank you for telling us that.
And I also want to thank you, as well as the work of the committee as well, regarding this bill. I'm sitting here and I'm following the discussion, and what I'm picking up is there seems to be some conflation here of NIL with revenue sharing. So I guess you can say the exchange you and I are about to have, the aim here is really to help sort of clarify, if you will, or make sure we demarcate between the two. But Senator, is it your understanding that NIL, or the acronym for name, image, and likeness, that universities are no longer directly involved with NIL? Is that your understanding?
Part of what you just asked me, I had trouble hearing you.
Is it your understanding that universities are no longer directly involved with name, image, and likeness? Directly involved.
There are entities that are separate from the athletic departments, as I think, that handle that. I don't know all the specifics of how that works.
And I'm not holding you out or trying to present you as an authority on it, on NIL specifically, but again, you've been dealing with this issue. So again, it's your understanding universities, I guess, somewhat indirectly involved, but we're not talking about university money specifically with respect to name, image, and likeness, right?
I mean, there's a statute. I've read it twice from up here today. It says you can't use state appropriations to pay athletes.
That's correct. And then we also have what we call this revenue sharing arrangement, which was spawned by the House case, correct?
Yes.
And with respect to revenue sharing, that is money that the athletics department generated as a result of sports, correct?
Yes.
And we're not talking about taxpayer dollars when we are discussing revenue that's been generated, say, by the University of South Carolina's athletics department, right? We're not talking about taxpayer money.
Correct.
And the reason I asked you that question, Senator, is because there seems to be some concern or solicitude around transparency. Some folk may feel that what an athlete earns or what they receive from this revenue sharing deal, that ought to be made public, if you will, or it should be foyable because of this belief that it's public dollars. But the reality is those aren't public funds, right?
Well, I'm not going to say they're not public funds. And it depends on what entity is receiving them. If the university is receiving them, there's a good argument they're public funds. And I think I've read in the paper that the governor was quoted as saying that if, and I don't want to misquote the governor, but I thought I remember reading in the last couple of weeks that he was quoted as saying that that these are public dollars because they've gone into the university. And I may be misquoting him. I thought I read that. But I think what you're trying to lay out is that there's a distinction.
That's correct.
Between the dollars that are generated by revenue sharing, the revenue sharing model, which is has come about because of the federal settlement. And it should be noted that there is no requirement in the federal settlement that there be public disclosure of the individual compensation agreements using the revenue sharing dollars. That's something I hadn't said earlier, but that's something that needs to be understood as well. and that the existing law already says that what is paid to a student athlete under NIL is not subject to public disclosure. And so the argument is that even without this bill, these dollars paid to student athletes with revenue sharing dollars are not subject to public disclosure. But there's an argument on the other hand that says that because we haven't specifically exempted it from public disclosure, that it is subject to disclosure. And that's what that lawsuit's about, in layman's terms. Sure. The one right down the street at Richland County Courthouse. And it's on hold. And so we have an opportunity as a General Assembly to pass this bill to clarify this, for lack of a better word, a gray area in the law. And I've just simply made the argument to you today that if we don't take action this session with this bill, there are things that will happen. If that information is disclosed later this year in our schools, unlike Auburn, where the senator from York went, if our schools, like South Carolina, where I went, or Clemson, where the senator from Greenville, Senator Turner, went, or Coastal Carolina, or South Carolina State, where Senator from Marion, Kent Williams, went, if those schools are required to disclose that information later this year, and the programs are at a competitive disadvantage, and it's reflected in what happens later this year on the field and with their recruiting efforts, we're not going to be able to get back here quick enough to take this up next session. And so that's the argument that I have tried to make to this body. I totally agree with my colleagues that this is not an area that you have a real good feeling about to take this action. But when you weigh the equities and you consider how this impacts so many of our constituents who are just fans, or they're more directly involved, whatever you can say they are, alumni, but this is South Carolina, this is a deep South, and football, and to some extent basketball and baseball mean a lot. And if we don't pass this, we're going to see our beloved schools at a competitive disadvantage, and we're not going to be able to get back here quick enough to pass it. That's what I foresee. And so I'm going to vote for it. I voted for it in the committee. I'm going to vote for it on the floor. And I urge my colleagues to vote for it. In spite of the general feeling that we have that this is not good for college athletics, again, if there's going to be a solution to college athletics, it needs to come from the national level, either the NCAA and or the federal government, so that every school is on a level playing field and not just certain schools. If we don't pass this, we're going to be helping all of these other schools in other states and not our schools.
Well, Senator, let's end this colloquy on a point of levity, and that is a small government conservative such as yourself is on record calling for federal intervention at the state level. And I concur with your, with that request.
I told you this didn't make me feel good. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you have?
See if the senator would yield.
For a question?
Yes, please.
Senator, yield for a question.
Yield for question.
Senator, yield for a question.
Senator, you know that I'm probably one of the few in this chamber that has an NIL daughter that was an athlete. Did you realize that?
I remember you sharing that with us at one time.
And you realize I'm probably understanding both sides of the issues, but I think, did you know that all of the comments I've heard so far about they don't like the NIL system and all of that, it's probably because they don't understand it from both sides. And I think I understand. I went to college here at Carolina, and my boyfriend at the time played football. And so I was a recruiter. And so I was friends with a lot of these athletes that would, if today, would probably be NIL athletes. Did you know that when you come to college on a scholarship, you have to sign a contract. And that contract is sort of a unilateral contract because the university can take it away at any time. Number one, the first thing you can't do is you can't work because your job becomes attending school. Did you know that? So
you are informing me.
So which means a lot of these athletes, unlike myself, I worked 3 jobs through college. I was a page, I worked for Dean of Student Affairs, and then when I could, I would go to the science department to do stats. Part of my salary on what I made had to help pay for my boyfriend at the time's food when we go out. I'm just saying that we make these comments and don't understand that there are 2 sides to every story. And these coaches that have presented these letters, and I appreciate them, and I know it's very hard coaching. Because after that, when my then boyfriend went on to the pros, finances wasn't an issue. But I look at all the other friends that were on USC's team, that they were all, the problem with a lot of these coaches, because they're both sides, and why NIL was enacted by and we're arguing about it and giving our opinion, but that train left the station a long time ago, and you know why, Senator? It left the station because there were so many coaches, like some of our coaches and SEC coaches, that would go out and they would stack their team with the top 5, with the 5-star athletes, and make them wait for 4 and 5 years, and they never get a chance to go into the pros. So there's 2 sides to every story. And part of why NIL became enacted is to level the playing field with athletes. And did you know, Senator, that it is my intention, and I support this legislation completely, because I think it sort of gives, as you say, a competitive advantage, and it'll keep an Alabama or a Georgia from coming in, getting this revenue sharing information and outbidding us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from Newberry, what purpose do you rise, sir?
See if the senator would yield for just a couple of questions.
Senator, yield for questions.
Yes, sir.
Senator, yield for
And
questions.
Senator, did you know I support your bill? And I will
It's not my bill, but I'm talking about
the
it.
bill you're speaking on.
Yeah.
And very briefly, I would say that the biggest problem we've had all along is with the NCAA. Would you not agree with that?
I agree with that.
All right.
And the transfer portal. I hear, and that's a whole nother issue. We're not getting into that.
But Senator, that occurred because of the NCAA. I mean, they're the ones that govern all of this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And having said that, for our colleagues that may or may not understand, would you say that the NCAA would be the equivalent of what they know as the South Carolina High School League?
Senator from Charleston, Senator Campson, what purpose do you rise?
Would Senator yield?
For questions. Senator yields for questions.
Senator, are you happy that we have NIL today, or do you wish we hadn't have it?
I'm personally more, I think the NCAA needs to step in on the transfer portal rules. NIL, as the senator from Colleton expressed, has been good in some ways and bad in some ways. And so, but as to this issue, the NCAA should, or the federal government, there needs to be a national solution. There should not be a scenario where certain schools in certain states are at a disadvantage compared to their schools in other states when it comes to this type of issue. And we've heard it today from the senator from York who went to Auburn. I mean, he clearly and eloquently explained why Auburn would want this information. And the senator from Williamsburg pointed out that somebody in another state one of these other states that has schools that our schools in our state compete against requesting this information. And if they get it, they could use it to their advantage and to our schools' disadvantage.
Do you think Nick Saban would still be coaching?
He might be.
If it weren't for NIL.
He might be. I mean,
and the
he's
transfer portal.
He greatest college football coach of my adult lifetime. A tremendous motivator and just a great coach. And he got out, and it's my understanding that one of the reasons he got out is because of where college athletics was headed.
Well, I'm asking these questions because I think that we've taken a wrecking ball to college sports. I played 2 sports in college, and I think it's been a horrible, radical change. And I can't help but think about Abraham Lincoln's, one of his quotes. Lincoln said, "What is conservatism? Is it not adherence to the old and tried against the new and untried?" And that's exactly what's happened to sports. I'm going to support this. I did not support NIL. I did not support the transfer portal. As you all recall, I fought that on the floor when the states had some jurisdiction and the feds took it away from us. But this is just an example. You don't take a wrecking ball to what's been handed down to you and perfected over time through multiple generations and then just take a wrecking ball to it. That's a general principle that should apply. We should take that as lawmakers. We should take that. Everyone needs to abide by that. And this is the result of taking a wrecking ball to what has been tried and true.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. President, if there's no more questions, I move for adoption.
Pending question is second reading of H 4902. Under Rule 16, the bill Senator Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose you have?
I think there's probably going to be some different votes. I just asked for a roll call vote.
Roll call's been requested on the bill. Do 5 members second that call? 1, 2, 3, 4, more than 5 second that call. We'll have a roll call. Thank you, sir. Clerk's ringing the bell. Reading clerk will call the roll on second reading of H 4902 on page 26. Call the roll.
Mr. Adams. Aye. Mr. Alexander. Aye. Mr. Allen. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Not voting, Mr. Blackman. Aye. Mr. Bright. Not voting, Mr. Campson. Aye. Mr. Cash. Not voting, Mr. Chaplin. Not voting, Mr. Clymer. Not voting, Mr. Corbin. No. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mrs. Devine. Not voting, Mr. Elliott. Aye. Mr. Fernandez. Not voting, Mr. Gambrell. No. Mr. Garrett. No. Mr. Goldfinch. Aye. Mr. Graham. Aye. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mr. Hembry. Aye. Mr. Hutto. Aye. Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kennedy. Not voting, Mr. Kimbrell. No. Mr. Lieber. Aye. Mr. Martin. No. Mr. Massey. No. Mrs. Matthews. Aye. Mr. Ott. Not voting, Mr. Peeler. No. Mr. Rankin. Aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. Not voting, Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sabb. Aye. Mr. Stubbs. No. Mr. Sutton. Aye. Mr. Tedder. Aye. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Walker. Aye. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. Aye. Mr. Zell. Aye.
Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Senator Clymer votes no. Further members wishing to cast their vote? Senator from Kershaw, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Senator from Richland.
Senator Devine, without objection, has leave. Senator Calhoun, Senator Ott votes aye. Senator Fernandez votes no. Senator Bright votes no. Senator Kennedy votes no. Further members wishing to cast their vote? Senator Rickenbach votes no. Senator Chaplin votes aye. Further members wishing to cast your vote? Final call. The polls are closed. The clerk will tabulate. Members of the Senate, by a vote of 30 to 13, H 4902 receives a second reading.